All right guys, I got some 1-inch lowering springs. Let's see if it drops the car by 1 inch. What's up guys, my name is Andy, and on this video we're going to install some lowering springs on the front of my 66 Fastback. What I've got here are some Scott Drake high performance springs. I believe there's something like 600-pound spring rate. They're supposed to lower the car 1 inch. And so what I've done, in the previous video, I did the Shelby Mod on the car and we dropped about 5/8 of an inch. And so by putting these on there, I'm actually skeptical that it's even going to lower the car at all. And I say that because I think these are the original springs that came on this car. And they're 55 years old. There's a good chance that they have sagged over time. They have a lower spring rate. I think these new springs are going to put us right where we're at now, or maybe even a little bit higher. So we'll have to check that out. And then from there, we'll determine if we need to cut any of the coils or not. I've covered before how to take this apart. In fact, my last video, I just covered it. So what we're going to do is we're more or less just going to start from with the springs already out, and we'll start talking about what we're going to do there. And we'll measure where the car starts at. We'll measure when we put the springs in. Then if we cut coils, we'll measure each step, and we'll kind of get an idea of where we want to end up, and then go from there. So let's get started. So on the passenger side, if we just draw a center line through the axle up to the fender here, we're looking at roughly 25 5/8 to the bottom of this fender lip, and that's what we're going to measure the next time we put the springs on, and we'll see where that is relative to the ground. Let's go try the driver's side. And on the driver's side, looks like we've got about 25 3/8, doing the same thing with the center line up through the axle here to the bottom of the fender. So it's about 1/4 of an inch lower on this side than the passenger side. So we'll see how that comes out when we get the lowering springs on here. So obviously stock springs, they look like the original. They're pretty old and rusty and probably tired. Here's the new springs, new, nice and shiny. Obviously they're a lot shorter, but because they have a higher spring rate, they don't need to be as long to cover the amount of travel that we need. So we're gonna go ahead and put them in as they are. We don't want to forget to transfer over this piece onto here. We'll do that. And then we'll go ahead and put them in the car and see where we come out with height and find out if we need to cut anything from there. All right, so I guess we'll be putting this stuff. This plastic piece is just so old and brittle, it's just breaking off of the spring. So we're just gonna go ahead and install these. These are the tops. The part where this flat part goes up inside the strut tower. And then you'll also notice that this part's got to the coil just kind of stops right there. It's not flat like this end. There's a little, on the perch pad in the upper control arm, there's a part where this needs to rest up against a tab. And so you'll know that when you put it in there, you got to clock it a certain way. And this part you want to be rested against a tab, and then you'll know you're in the right spot. All right, so I just backed the car out and backed it back in just to let the suspension settle a little bit. You know, when you put the car down, the tires kind of bind up a little bit, and it can kind of give you a false sense of the height of the car. So just take it out and just turn the wheel and pull it back in, and you should be good to go. So let's measure and see what we came up with. Remember, we started with 25 5/8 on the passenger side here, and let's see where we came out. We're looking at about 25 7/8. So we went up 1/4 of an inch with these 1-inch lowering springs. And again, because I think it's those original springs had sagged over time, we're sitting at 25 7/8. I like to get down to 25 or just below 25. So I'm gonna take off a 1/2 coil on this side, and supposedly a 1/2 coil is about 1 inch. But we'll know, because we know that this is 25 7/8. So we'll take this car back up, take the coil off, cut a half a coil off, put it back in, then remeasure it, and we'll know what a half a coil will equal with these particular springs. Well, let's check the driver's side real quick. And on the driver's side, we started with 25 3/8. And so we're sitting at about 25 1/2. So we went up 1/8 on this side, but up 1/4 inch or 2/8 on the other side. So this side, we don't need to quite cut a half a coil, but I do want it level, even them out. So we'll go ahead and start out with a half a coil on each spring and see where we fall out with that. Okay, so what we're gonna do is you really just need to just draw a line across here to the other half, and that will be a half a coil. It won't measure 1 inch from here to there, but they say a half a coil is about 1 inch. So we'll find out how that comes out. But we don't want to do more than that. You can always sneak up on it if we need to do like a 1/4 coil after this or something, we can do that. But we'll just stick with a half a coil here. We'll do that on both sides and then put it back in the car. That's a half a coil on each spring, and we're gonna just hit a little bit of we'll just get some black spray paint and just cover these ends so that they don't rust. We don't want those parts rusting and getting underneath the paint of this, so we'll just hit some black paint on that and put it back in the car. All right, I just backed the car out and brought it back in just so the suspension can level out, and I can already tell this car is much lower. Remember, we started with 25 7/8 after I put those springs on, and we cut a half a coil off, and now we're sitting at about 24 1/2. So this side, we took 1 3/8 of an inch off with a half a coil. Let's check the other side real quick. And remember, on the driver's side, we were at 25 1/2 before we cut that half a coil off, and now we're at 24 1/4. So this side took 1 1/4 inch off. So I don't know if it has to do with the fender, where it sits. I don't know why this side's lower. I'm not in the car, so I'm not lowering the car, but let's step back and take a look at everything. All right, guys, man, look at that. That is actually where I want it, which is great. I don't have to cut any more coils. You can tell that we still got to take care of the rear. I got some stock shackles for the rear, so I'm going to do that first, then see how the car comes out, and then from there we'll decide which leaf springs we're going to go with. I don't want to have to use lowering blocks if I can help it. I prefer to use springs, but we'll see how that comes out. Anyways, for this, one other thing too, when we drop that back end down, that may change where this falls out. I don't know, I mean, we're talking maybe a fraction of an inch, but that's a pretty good spot. This is actually where I like it. The top of the tire is just below the edge of the rim here. I like it tucked inside there. I don't want to dump this car and make it on the ground, but I like how that came out. That looks really good. So just to recap, guys, okay, what we did is, remember in the previous video, I did that Shelby Mod, and that took out 5/8 of an inch of height out of the car. Then I added the Scott Drake high performance leaf springs. They were 95 bucks for the pair. They're supposed to be a 1 inch drop. The part number is down below in the description. So when we put them on, it actually raised the car about what, 1/4 of an inch or something like that, and which is fine. If we hadn't done that, the Shelby Mod, it would have, the car would be even higher than it was. But anyway, so just for comparison, we put those springs in there. Then we cut off a half a coil. And when we did that, we took off 1 3/8 of an inch on this side and 1 1/4 inches on the other side, how everything measured out. So we're sitting at 24 1/2 over here, 24 1/4 on the other side. Good enough for me. I like how it came out. I do want to point out though, when I cut that half the coil off, I didn't have to use the spring compressor to get the spring to fit back inside there. It just by itself, you know, it could fit right in there. And the downside with that is that when you lift the car up and this whole suspension drops, the top of the spring that's sitting up here in the strut tower, it actually kind of comes uncentered and it'll shift to the side a little bit. So you're gonna have to be, if you do what I did, you're gonna have to be careful of that when you pick up the car in the front and set it back down. That coil is gonna shift a little bit and you're gonna have to mess with that. And I might be able to figure something out to kind of keep that thing centered, but we'll have to do that later. But for now, that's how it came out. You guys, I think it came out pretty good. We still got the rear to do, but I like it. And with the stiffer springs, another thing too, I could have just cut a coil or whatever off of the stock springs and dropped the car. The problem that we have there is the springs are really soft, right, relative to these. So any kind of bump I'm gonna hit, I'm gonna get a lot more travel, and then I'll hit the bump stop or whatever that bumper piece on the inside the fender there. On the top of the upper control arm, the upper A-arm, there's that bushing there, that ball joint, and that will hit that shield that's covering around the spring. So with the softer spring, I don't want to hit that and bottom this thing out. So with the stiffer spring, I won't get as much travel, which is fine. I'm trying to get a little more, not race car, but a little sportier suspension on this, and that's where we're gonna head with this. I still have more plans to do, but so that's why we went with a new spring and a stiffer rate than the stock ones, and then why I just cut a half a coil to get what I want. Another question you guys might ask is, why didn't you just buy a spring that was a 2-inch drop instead of a 1-inch drop? They may be out there for what I paid. I mean, less than $100. And then I had to have a grinder to cut off a half a coil. If you guys can find springs that it's a 2-inch drop, hey, you don't have to cut anything, throw it in there and you're good to go. Another option would be coilovers, outside of the budget for what I'm trying to do here. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are in the same boat. Cutting a half a coil is not really something that I'm looking forward to, but it's the best of both worlds. I get the height that I want. I don't have to pay a lot of money for a coilover setup. All right, guys, so that's it. If you guys like it, give me a thumbs up, I appreciate it. And if you subscribe, I do appreciate that as well, because it helps my channel out. And we'll see you in the next one.